Good morning and welcome to session 2 of the Iowa Ideas Conference. I'm your moderator, Diana Nolan. This session is titled Shifts in Giving, and I'll just read the description briefly here. Over the years, generational and corporate wealth have taken a dramatic turn, bringing to light the politics of fundraising. While change in giving across industries is certain, the assumption that arts and culture entities are safe is dangerous. Who leads giving in Iowa, and how can individual, state, and corporate advocates keep support of the arts top of mind? So there's a lot to talk about in this session. I'm Diana Nolan, arts and entertainment reporter at the Gazette, and I've been involved in the paper and the arts scene and the community since 1982. And so I will go around the room and I'll let our other panelists introduce themselves. We have one more panelist that we're trying to bring on board. So as soon as she is able to join us, then we will introduce her as well. Okay, let's start with you, Jenna.
Good morning. My name is Jenna Ramsey, and I am the State and Community Development Director in Stanton, Iowa.
Excellent. And Leslie?
Hello, my name is Leslie Wright. I'm currently director at Prairie Woods Franciscan Spirituality Center, but have a couple decades of experience in the nonprofit sector.
Okay. Let's see, do we have Lois on board yet?
Yes, I'm here, but I don't think you can see my picture.
Oh, yeah, bummer. She's lovely. So those of you who are watching, you're missing out on her bright and sparkly face. So Lois, just introduce yourself, please, to our viewers.
Sure. My name is Lois Bunce, and I do nonprofit consulting and have worked at United Way previously. So happy to be with all of you.
And we're happy to have all of you with us. So our time together this morning will include talking with our panelists who you've just met and addressing audience questions. All of our sessions have closed captioning access, and all of our sessions are being recorded. So we have a lot of questions. The panelists met with me earlier and we sort of hammered out some topics, and I put them together in hopefully in a nice linear fashion that will flow for us. So I'll start just a little bit. When I directed a children's theater program in the late 80s, corporate donors were very supporting of the arts. Soon, however, that giving shifted to the social services sector and it became harder to find financial support for the arts. So what trends are you folks seeing as far as that goes? Who wants to jump in? Lois?
Sure. Well, I think there have been a lot of shifts in giving, obviously, not only for the arts, but, for all of the nonprofits. Some of what has happened is that we're seeing less corporate support, obviously, because the economic environment has changed and many corporations no longer have local leaders here. So that's certainly shifted. And, the other thing is we just are seeing fewer donors overall. The Giving USA report says giving was down in 2022, their latest report. So we know fewer people are contributing.
Leslie, what are you seeing as far as, because Prairie Woods, for those who might not know, covers a lot of territory as far as artistic endeavors, social and spiritual endeavors.
I think I would echo certainly what Lois has mentioned. Some of our demographic shifts, I think, are important for us to consider in terms of giving as well. Where the wealth is in our communities, and also who's participating in our arts and culture organizations. So certainly here at Prairie Woods, our demographic tends to be older rather than younger. So it's a concern for us to think about that next generation of givers and how they're becoming engaged with our arts and culture organizations. So they feel that same sense of ownership that has been true in the past.
And Jenna, you are in sort of a different kind of realm as heading up a real grassroots kind of organization. Tell us a little bit about Stanton, where it is and what you're doing over there, because it's really vibrant and exciting.
Yes, Stanton is located in southwest Iowa. It's a town of about 700. But a lot of things that we do, everyone knows in rural are really southwest Iowa and regional. Currently, we have our local Stanton Community Foundation that's helping with fundraising for daycare expansion. We just finished up a downtown facade project with 8 buildings. We're working on trail expansion and also working with other groups such as the Swedish Heritage and Cultural Center and different groups in arts and culture to do fundraising and expansions and things like that. And like everyone else has mentioned it, I echo there's less corporate giving and maybe less individual donors. And we've really worked hard on figuring out how we can gauge or work with those donors that we do have that we know are passionate about what we're doing.
Excellent. Tell me a little about the facades project. You mentioned Swedish. Is it a predominantly Swedish heritage area?
Yes, we are a small but mighty community, really proud of our Swedish heritage. We do incorporate that, figure out how we can incorporate that in all that we do. And one of the things that we promote, we still have Swedish events. An example would be we in 2020, I believe, got the AARP Community Challenge grant and put Dollar Horse trail markers along the trail.
Oh,
So
cool.
figuring out how we can keep that in our community.
I just wondered because I went to college in Pella and they have the whole Dutch fronts as even Casey's has a Dutch front on its facade and Walmart and some of the big, as opposed to, obviously the homegrown businesses have Dutch fronts as well. So
Yes, we don't have that in Stanton. We went with what they looked like, kind of going back. Pella is amazing. We don't have that in our downtown facade, but we're looking at kind of phase 2 of our downtown project after these buildings are done. And, what can we incorporate in our downtown, with our Swedish heritage? We talked about Dollar Horse statues or different things like that.
excellent. So we've talked a little bit about demographic changes and touched briefly on, as more one-time locally owned businesses are falling under larger corporate umbrellas, often headquartered in another part of the country, how does this affect giving at the local level?
Well, I can jump in there a little bit, I believe. So, in the past, I think many nonprofits would go to corporations for sponsorships for events as well as local support in terms of just their general programs and services. And I was looking at the Chronicle of Philanthropy this last week, and since 1982, corporate giving has dropped in half by 50%. So that's pretty significant. I think what it means is the relationships that nonprofits used to have with people within companies and corporations is hard to maintain now because there's so much change and many of the leaders don't live here locally. So I think it's more difficult to have a connection with the company. And then secondly, some companies are going to a very employee-driven giving model where the employees choose what they want to support rather than it coming from the corporation. So that really changes the environment a great deal also.
It certainly does. Leslie, how about you? Have you noticed that?
So what strikes me is that with arts and culture, oftentimes programming is sponsored. That's a big portion of what supports an effective budget for an arts and culture organization. So as corporations shift their priorities, as the dollars become more competitive, those sponsorships, which are vital to whether it's supporting the next show at TCR or the next art installation at the Museum of Art, that just becomes more challenging to achieve. And again, as Lois mentioned, if leadership level donors are no longer deeply connected to the community, The other thing that you tend to notice is that with a corporation not based in a particular community, do people put down deep roots? Again, it's that ownership of arts and culture. Because you are competing also, this language around impact has become so popular. It's a lot easier for people to process the impact of 100 meals versus 100 seats in a show for young people, those kinds of things. And I'm making some pretty big generalizations, but that's what I think about.
Yeah, it's a pretty wide swath. Now, I know in the past, a lot of companies have offered like a 2-for-1 match. Like if I were to give $100 to an organization, then the company would also give $100 to an organization. Are you seeing that still as a model in the community?
I think there is some of that still going on, Diana, although it's certainly decreased, I would say significantly.
Um,
So there are very few companies who do the employee match anymore.
That's too bad, because that was always a nice way to kind of pump up those dollars. How has the economic climate affected giving? We've been through recessions, we've been through some good times, we've been through some lean times. Coming out of the pandemic, we're still, I think, trying to make inroads. So, what's the economy doing for you?
Well, I think one of the things we're seeing is that because the stock market has been a little jumpy and inflation is a little higher than it has been, people are being more conservative and careful in terms of their giving. I think it's impacting the larger gifts more. People who have done, 6-figure gifts are holding back, I think, a bit right now and just thinking things through and kind of waiting to see what's going to happen in the economy. The other thing is that a lot of the mid-range donors, people who gave $100, maybe up to $1,000, that was a big core of givers, and they've certainly been impacted more by inflation than even the larger donors. So I think they're also being very cautious.
And Jenna, in Stanton, now you had to create a foundation, is that right?
We did, yes. We created the Stanton Community Foundation in 2020, and we created that because we really didn't have a place for people could make donations for different things. We have the downtown. They can make donations for the downtown, for the daycare, for our trail. We have an outdoor basketball court project they just completed. So really just a nonprofit foundation in our community that we really focus on. And people are making donations. We've seen, that are specific to those projects, but we also have people that make donations and just for a general fund for, upcoming projects, because it's important to have funds there for matches to apply for grants and things like that. So using it at our discretion.
So, for those watching, and for my own benefit too, how in the world do you start a foundation?
Well, so we worked with it was actually through FMTC. They helped us with a legal firm that helped us create the documents and things like that. And it actually took about 6 months to get everything together and approved and processed. First you have to find a team of people that are passionate about it, that understand the goal. And then with that, work with the lawyer to get the paperwork done, creating the officers and bylaws and things like that, and then wait for approval for our federal ID number.
So, how long of a process was that for you guys?
The I would say at least 6 months. It wasn't that hard to get once you confirmed the legal counsel to help you and get the documents drawn up, but we were pending our approval for a federal ID number for probably 6 months. We had to wait.
Very good. And how did you get people on board? How did you entice them to give?
It kind of depends on on the age or demographic, I say. I guess the younger ones it seemed like, if the foundation had events or things like that, they would come and support the event and give a donation. And then we have a mailer campaign that we sent out at the end of the year, told people what we were doing, and every year, and necessary the more what do I want to say, older demographic is the one that would send back donations for that.
Okay, doke. So who are some of the larger funding sources you've turned to, like at the state level or regional level?
So we have a lot of great partners. The Iowa Area Development Group has been a partner for us and helped us, identify sources and find projects. The Iowa Economic Development Authority has been a great resource for us. We were with them we applied for the CDBG funds for the downtown facade. So they're always a great partner with potential funding opportunities. We also have other partners that we use that haven't necessarily we haven't necessarily received the funds, but we got the designation, and they'll help have helped us if they see something with our projects. We're an AARP livable community. We're an Iowa Great Place, and then a Wellmark Healthy Hometown.
Excellent. How about you, Leslie? What are some of the beyond corporate and individual donors, some of the organizations you've been able to turn to for funding?
Well, when I think about arts and culture in particular, I mean, they're the logical folks who come to mind, like the Iowa Arts Council and NEA, museum associations. So those are great places to turn for us. Silos and Smokestacks is currently a group that we're pursuing a relationship with in the hopes that we can, for a variety of reasons, get on their list, be an attraction. And then for us, our focus is on people we can build a strong relationship with, people we have an alignment with mission, to get folks who are vested and ideally people we can keep going back to from one year to the next because we're aligned.
And Lois, I know you've done a lot of consulting. Who are some of the sources that you advise folks to turn to?
Well, there are obviously major, foundations, both corporate and family foundations in the state. And I think we're looking more at family foundations sometimes now to support arts and culture. Some of the state support has it's changed over time, and so there is a little less available, I think, on a public level, and so we have tended to look more for private sources, I think. And obviously, there's great local support here through our community foundations, which are located in many of the counties.
And I know that when I first started seeking grants for children's theater programming, I had a mentor who helped me, thank goodness. But I would look at the documentation and I would be like, oh my gosh. But I found for me, if I just approached it like my taxes back then and went line by line, it wasn't quite so daunting. How do you advise folks when they are seeking these grants from larger entities, like at the state and regional or even national level of NEA, if they're going that route? How do you advise them to set about seeking those grants and writing the application forms?
Well, I think one of the things, because many nonprofits are smaller, I usually encourage them to find someone who can help them, who's done it before, and might be a volunteer on your board, or someone that, they know who's had some experience. I know it's difficult to hire somebody to help you with the grant. But if it's affordable, I really encourage people to do that too, because it is a skill, and people who do a lot of it kind of understand the techniques of it. And it can be a bit daunting, to go through it line by line. So I really recommend that somebody talk to who's ever done these grants before, and B, get some additional help. Don't try and just struggle through it yourself.
Yeah, right. And so for the viewers who might be contemplating how to fund a project that they are championing, I would just say that because I had a mentor who helped me, and I did approach it, take a deep breath and go line by line and have all the documentation in place that I needed, I was successful. And I was like 24. So, if I could come out of the gates and get that accomplished, I would say to those of you who are watching, don't be intimidated by it. Give it a shot. I mean, the worst they can say is no, and they just might say yes.
And I
So,
would,
well, oh, go ahead, Leslie.
no, I was just going to say, and I would add to that too, remembering the experiential nature of particularly arts and culture. And so how can you get potential funders to have a direct experience of what you're offering to the community, whether it's because you have really strategic storytelling, or people actually have the opportunity to come out, see, feel, experience what it is you offer.
And that kind of leads into my next question. While many donors, especially to the arts, will see tangible usage of their dollars, they'll see a play or they'll hear a concert, how do you inspire people to give to the ongoing expenses that aren't sexy but are vital to keeping doors open? I mean, every nonprofit that has a building has electrical bills and heating and cooling bills and staff salaries and all those things that are just the everyday nitty-gritty ways you have to keep running. So how do you entice donors that maybe in addition to sponsoring or sending money for a specific event, to send money for the actual what keeps the doors open?
And
I'll just go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say in 2018, we set out on a creative placemaking plan, which a lot of the projects we are in the process of completing or arts projects to come. And the plan involved, the community and everybody pitching in and help. So when we talk to donors and everybody, having the plan and making sure that people know the plan was from them and things that they wanted, not necessarily, a certain group or person's agenda. But showing them then what we're completing in the plan. When we go talk to donors or end of the year, or we do a monthly newsletter or monthly newspaper page, a variety of things to keep people up to date of here's what's being done, and letting people know that, this is what you wanted and here's where we're at. And we've had, not that we couldn't always use more, but we have great supporters, that we're moving forward and showing them how we're growing.
And you also, didn't you poll the folks in the community to see what they wanted?
We did. We had an in-person meeting of 175 people. And then we also did online surveys and paper surveys and things like that to try to reach everybody.
And so then that gives them kind of a feeling of ownership. If their idea, if they see that coming to fruition, I would think that would be kind of a little pat on the back perhaps, or something that makes them more excited.
Yes.
Okay, and Leslie, I think Lois, I think you were going to jump in with a comment on this, inspiring folks to not only support the wonderful artists like Emanuel Axe, although he came here for free, but still, so you've got something like that versus donating to help pay the heating expenses at TCR, that kind of thing.
Right. It is a hard sell. There's no doubt about it. Sometimes you can craft gifts where, even though they're giving to a specific project or exhibit that, say 10% goes to administration, you can kind of maybe craft a gift that way. I know some United Ways in the past have actually had gone to donors and said, would you pay some of the administrative costs, because then when we go to private donors in the community, 100% of their money can go to a project. But you have to get somebody to sign on to do that back office stuff, which isn't, it isn't popular, and it's not the most visible piece, but it is very, very critical. And then give them lots and lots of thanks and praise.
Well, we've had several capital campaigns come through our area in recent years. And sometimes, I mean, the capital campaigns also have that included in as an element, don't they? Or
Yeah, I mean, there's usually administrative costs attached to it. Jenna talked about a foundation. Obviously, if you have a foundation, the interest that's earned through the principal of a foundation could be used for your administrative costs, and that's one of the good reasons to develop one over time if you can, because that helps offset asking donors to cover that piece.
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead,
Endowment, I
Lisa.
think, is a good strategy. But I would also say on the nonprofit side, it's incumbent upon us to understand what our functional costs are. And so, without making a big deal out of it, sponsorship for a particular show or activity should also include in that estimate, in that target amount, what it takes to really put that show on. But the other thing we're seeing in our environment is offering people the opportunity to contribute even as they're signing up for programs. So we've tried that and seen a really nice increase in the number of people who are making general donations in addition to the fee associated with the program they're participating in. So it takes a variety of strategies to get that done.
And I've also seen with some of our groups that have brick and mortar naming conventions, like pay X amount of dollars and your name will be on the back of a seat in the auditorium. So how important are naming conventions these days? Because frankly, sometimes some of our venues, I can't keep up with the name of the venue these days because it's changed a lot in the 40 years I've been here.
I mean, I think naming options for donors is still very popular. Certainly in capital campaigns, there are always naming opportunities for major donors to, say they want to be a part of this project and they're proud of it, and therefore, because they give major gifts, they want some naming options. And they may have a specific part of the project that's really important to them too. On the other hand, for smaller donors, things like buying a seat at the theater or a brick in the walkway to an exhibit are a way to get people engaged at a much lower cost level. And once you get them engaged, then it's easier to, hopefully maintain them as a donor and get them interested in the cause, because they've made an investment, even if it's a small one.
Jenna, have you used any naming conventions? Like, is there like somebody's name on the back of a dollar horse?
No, but it's a great idea.
Yeah.
No, well, I would say we've noticed that we've had much better luck, for lack of a better term, if we did something with naming. As an example, for when we started our campaign for our daycare, which is 3.2 million, we just did a general campaign. Well, then we decided the first year, and we had a little bit of luck, but then the next year we went with naming rights for the rooms and things like that, and we were able to do that and secure those. Not that they all came flocking to us, but people really like to have their name and be able to see it.
How do you raise $3.2 million when you have 700 people in your town?
Well, again,
That's
we're
amazing.
small rural Iowa. It's really about Southwest Iowa. Our daycare actually covers 5 counties. So Southwest Iowa, and it's a lot more than just our town.
Okay, that makes good sense then. So now something that, oh, I know. Let's talk a little bit about the generosity gene. What is that and how do you cultivate it?
Well, I'll jump in there. I think, we mentioned that a little when I was doing research for my book on women's philanthropy. One of the things that I came across was a study that was done at the Women's Philanthropy Institute at Indiana University, and it's about how people learn about philanthropy. And it was a question I asked a lot of the people I interviewed in my research, is who taught you about philanthropy? And everybody had a mentor. Everybody selected, it could have been a parent who put money in the collection plate at church, or it could be a colleague at work who taught them how to get involved in, nonprofits in their community. But the generosity gene tracks whether parents' involvement in philanthropy influences their sons or daughters. And what's interesting is that daughters are more influenced by their parents' philanthropic behavior. And so for families that have an annual income of $100,000 or more, the daughters are 27% more likely to be engaged in philanthropy. But I think a lot of it just comes down to observation, what you see people doing and why they do it, and to have them talk about what they care about, the mission of their life, and it encourages your children to do it then. The other thing is there's a lot of family philanthropy going on now where multi-generations are getting involved. And people have family accounts where they're making decisions, parents and children together.
And that is so cool. I remember as a little kid going to Sunday school, taking my dime and dropping it in the little church bank when we all gathered together to sing songs before we went to our classrooms. And I also was really into Trick or Treat for UNICEF, which I'm not sure they do anymore. But, that I think you can't say enough about instilling in a child a little pride in giving or collecting or, that sort of thing. Leslie, what are your views on building philanthropy across these generations?
Well, one of the things that I was going to comment on is not just because I worked for United Way, but years ago when I was a buyer at Target stores, United Way campaigns were a great time when, there was a culture of giving. And I know there can be a downside in that in the corporate environment, but when you look at the history of significant participation in giving in communities, it's because there's energy, there's a group identity around it, things like that. So as, I'm wondering about, because I don't have data about this, but as corporations do less and less of that large scale activity around philanthropy in the communities in which they operate, how that's impacting us and our generosity gene as well. Because any of us tend to look around at our peers and colleagues and get inspired by what they do. So as communities, I think there's work for us to do in inspiring each other to participate in what's good for all of us.
Let's talk a little bit about the sweat equity that comes with the Day of Giving that I know United Way has done a lot, but I think it's a model that can go across with other organizations as well. Can either you or Lois talk a little bit about the whole philosophy behind Day of Giving?
Sure. It's a way to get people involved. A lot of companies want to have a volunteer experience for their employees to show them what is available in the community. And many companies do sometimes give employees time off so they can go and volunteer. So the Day of Giving kind of developed as a way to give companies and organizations in the community an opportunity to learn about United Way because they go and volunteer at a nonprofit. The companies like it because it gets their employees out and engaged, and a lot of great work gets done for nonprofits that they normally would have to pay for. So it's kind of a win-win all around, and it's really gained momentum, I think, over the years to where, I think they had up to 1,000 people who used to participate in something like that.
That's excellent. Leslie, did you have something to add to that?
Well, I think anything that offers people an opportunity, I think Dubuque does a great job with this as well, where they create an event. I think Jenna talked about how event-based giving can be really effective. So how do we get people energized and motivated and have a sense of community around giving? So whether it's Day of Caring, Giving Tuesday, some other giving day. How do we get people engaged and probably even a little competitive? That doesn't hurt either.
That's right. And I think the nonprofits have like a Thursday or a Friday around Thanksgiving time where it's dedicated to donating to nonprofits. Jenna, do you have any sweat equity programs going on down there where people who maybe don't have as much money to give can grab a paintbrush and help spruce up those community facades?
We do have a local group that will help out with fixing up things at houses and things like that. It's our partnership with local churches that involve younger people and things like that. I was gonna say we were talking about the younger demographic or and helping and them donating is we have really seen a difference in all of the organizations, I guess, that I've been a part of that have set up Venmo and looked at more or PayPal and things like that through technology and ways to give, especially from the younger group. So one way to keep the younger people or younger generations to donate, setting up Venmo or PayPal or things like that.
Is it hard to do? I mean, I set up my own Venmo and I managed it, but at a larger level, is it hard to do?
I guess not that I've experienced yet, just like setting up your own, but at a for a foundation.
At a much larger scale. So something that we talked about the other day that I find so fascinating. Lois, can you tell us a little bit more about studying the way women give versus the way men give?
Sure. Well, I think over the past 20 years or so, there's a lot more research that's been done about how different groups of donors give differently. And it used to be we kind of had a one size fits all approach, when we approached a donor as a fundraiser. But again, the Women's Philanthropy Institute has done a lot of great research. So now they actually have statistical data in addition to anecdotal data about how women give. And just, a couple general things. Number one, women like to build a relationship and really know the impact of their gift. So they usually want more information about what the gift is going to be about. They really care about what's going to happen to their money, which means sometimes it takes a little longer for them to make a decision. But they also like to be very social and do things in collaboration or connection with other people. And I think that's why things like the Go Red for Women campaign for Heart or the, breast cancer pink ribbon walks and campaigns are very popular because there's a very much of a social element to it, as well as women giving to women. And women like to do that. It's also why things like giving circles have become very, very popular, where women get together as a group and collectively pool their money. So they learn about philanthropy and also, are able to do it in relationship with other people. And women will consult more. They'll ask other people for more information before they make decisions. So it's less transactional for them, I think, and it's about a deeper relationship. So my recommendation is get to know your women donor really well, and it'll pay off.
So is it imperative for an organization to create an event that might entice women? Or is it more just as useful to say, encourage women to form a giving group and weigh their options? Which model is more successful, do you think?
Well, I think it depends on the size of the organization and the resources you have. Starting a women's specific program does take some energy and time, and you have to have somebody who's going to take care of it and nurture it. And you have to have your organizational leadership that's really supportive of it too. So, that's one issue. But I think something, if for organizations, if they don't want to carve out a specific women's program, is, just start looking at who your women donors are, try and collect some information, find out what they give to, make a special effort to engage them more. Because I think many times, particularly when couples give, the spouse sometimes gets overlooked. And so it's really important to engage them and look at your marketing communication materials. Are you targeting some of it to women in terms of the words you use and the messages you have?
And it feels like there was a time when I was involved in a group that met at noon, and it was sort of a brainstorming group, but it was for women, and it was across the generations. And we would get together for lunch and just sort of network. Is that kind of thing useful too?
Sure. I mean, I think that's, I think for one thing, because you learn from each other, but you also support each other a great deal. And so I think those are very popular forums too. And I would encourage people, to do things like that within their organization. Because I think women want to get involved. They'll be very loyal donors if you do get them engaged. And they are going to have a lot more money in the future. There's a lot of wealth data out there right now about how women's wealth is going to increase. And so I think if nonprofits aren't carving out something specific for women donors, you're going to miss a great opportunity now and in the next 10, 15 years.
Talk a little bit about the inheritance factor. That is something I hadn't considered until you mentioned it in our preparation session.
Yeah, women, the Rockefeller Foundation talks about how women will experience what they call a dual wealth transfer. So many of us may inherit from our parents if they had assets. It's not unusual for parents to pass on their assets to their children. And secondly, women statistically outlive men by 5 to 7 years. So if women are engaged in a partnership or a marriage, many times they may outlive a spouse if it's a more traditional marriage. So they may inherit from their parents and then again from a partner, which means that many, many women as they age are really the person who's going to make philanthropic decisions about whatever assets are in the family. So it's incumbent to us to, I think, keep them engaged.
And now that we live in such a connected world through the internet, we don't have to just look at the people living in a specific town to get to rally behind a cause. You mentioned something about that the other day. Can you talk a little bit more about that to our audience, Lois?
Well, maybe reword that question a little so I know a little bit more what you're asking for.
Okay, well, I believe it was you the other day who was talking about like the Czech Museum. They don't just have to look to donors who are living in the corridor, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City corridor. They can engage people living in the Czech Republic or Slovakia. So because of our internet connectivity, that opens other new doors for funding.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think particularly in arts and culture, because there's something visible, having more video and asking people to participate in an exhibit and being able to show that exhibit to people literally all over the country and all over the world is a way to get donors to be engaged, even if they can't come personally and experience it. So I think that's being used more and more, and I'm sure both Jenna and Leslie are using those same techniques in the organizations they're in.
Leslie, you're nodding. So is that something that you folks are doing out of Prairie Woods?
Absolutely. Certainly during the shutdown with the pandemic, all of us explored using virtual technology. And it allowed us to do two things. One, engage speakers and thought leaders from across the globe, but also that led to us engaging participants from across the globe. And I think that's an opportunity. It's hard work and requires focus. And I think that also goes back to setting creative pricing structures so that that sort of global reach turns into meaningful resources for you.
Yeah, I think that's an important aspect because during the pandemic, when arts organizations were trying to figure out how to stay relevant, what they could offer to online viewers, so much of the programming was free, which is great. But eventually, the light bill has to be paid and the heating bill has to be paid. And so they spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to monetize it and yet keep it affordable for people who are watching at home or on their laptop somewhere. So is that something that you guys have struggled or danced around?
Certainly. I think establishing a meaningful value, there are two sides of that. One is don't sell yourself short. To your point, you have to pay the bills, you have to pay the talent that's involved. But also then it's incumbent upon you to create an experience that the participant feels like they got value for what they contributed. And that's, I think all of us got more sophisticated over the couple of years of the lockdown in finding ways to do that for people. For us, it's about creating community, because when people have that sense of community around whatever their experience is, they're going to come back again.
And how do you reach, what are some of the new avenues for reaching out to people these days? It used to be you'd get a mailer maybe in June or July, and then again in December for year-end giving. And that was kind of it. But now it seems like a whole new world. And so how are you guys navigating that new world?
I can jump in and just say that it's tricky because just like if you and I got paper mail from someone every week, we would stop opening the envelope. We have to be pretty thoughtful about how we're targeting our engagement with people and make sure it's meaningful. And also, how are we thoughtful about deepening people's engagement? How do we meet you? How do we deepen our relationship? How do we make you want to come back? So we're using all, I'll call them the venues or the vehicles, blog posts, website, emails, paper, but also events. How do we create an experience that, particularly for us, because we're land-based, how do we help people experience the land and develop a sense of value for and connection to that makes them want to support the whole mission?
Do you have a certain time frame in which you do these asks? Because everybody asks in from Thanksgiving to New Year's or New Year's Eve, because that last minute chance for getting a tax break for your money. And then a lot of them also do an ask at maybe their fiscal year ends in June, and so about that time. So how do you navigate those two really concentrated asking periods? Do you go a little earlier? Do you go a little later? Or do you just, put your eggs in the same basket and hope that it's attractive to folks?
We ask ourselves that question every year. So honestly, I'm really interested to see what the other two right now. We've been sending it out right after Thanksgiving, but we are always questioning if that's the same time too. We really try to keep things in front of people every month with our email database and through newspaper, radio for locals, go looking at all those avenues. But we do an end of the year campaign, but I'm curious what the other two recommend or have had better luck with.
Yeah, I think you just have to use all the vehicles, and people do end of the year solicitations. So I'm not opposed to that at all, because a lot of donors do wait till the end of the year, or they kind of collect all their requests and then decide what they're going to give. So you definitely want to get in there, sometime in November. I usually recommend a little earlier rather than later. Giving Tuesday, people just get bombarded. So unless you have something very unique, it's really easy to get lost in Giving Tuesday, which is obviously right around Thanksgiving. I think it's more important to just try and think of really new creative ways to reach your donors that are going to spark their interest. Because if you're doing the same thing over and over again, it's really not going to catch their attention. And so most people have really gone to a lot more video, much less paper, very, short, more graphic reports to engage individuals, and then, keep doing it year round. Don't wait till the end of the year.
I would say too, and this is counsel from people much smarter than me in the fundraising field, but it is still relationship building, no matter who your audience is. And so knowing who they are, knowing the best time and the right vehicle. For us, we have certainly individuals we want to reach out to and get in front of them when they're making their year-end decisions, let them know here we are. But we also have vendors and nearby businesses that we want to build a relationship with. And so we want to get in front of them as they're building budgets for their next year. So, we've got to build a multi-pronged strategy and go after that. But build the relationship so it's not just an ask out of the blue. So people have a sense of how they're connected to us and why it matters for them to support us.
Something that I found really interesting, that after all the years I've been involved in this, I just found out in the last couple of years, a fairly common practice among the arts organizations in this town is they know who their angel donors are, and they will just, if they have a project coming up that needs funding, they will ask to take that person out to lunch or do a one-on-one pitch. And I've discovered that sometimes those most generous donors are just waiting to be asked. And I had never thought about that. Is that something that you find?
Yeah, I think when you're you have loyal donors. Most organizations do. People who, because it's something that's personal for them, or they love arts and culture, whether it's the art museum or the orchestra or whatever, they're committed and they're going to be returning donors. I think you also have to know your donors' capacity and what drives their interest. But yeah, I think sometimes people really do like to be asked. That the other thing they'd like to give their advice. I mean, ask them for their input as well as for their money, because you may have a special project you really need funding for, but I think if you ask them for what they think about it, that's just as valuable, and then maybe the money will follow. But yeah, I mean, I think most donors know that when you call them up and say, let's have coffee, there's usually an ask not too far down the road.
Well, it's been a strategy that has worked. I just wrote a story about this wonderful man I've known for years and his wife, who passed away in the last year or two. And so, the opera company they wanted to start a specific program. It's a vocal competition, and with a really wonderful prizes for, the winners. And so they called this gentleman and set up, took him out to lunch, and he's like, sure. And other times, coming out of the flood or coming out of the pandemic, he would just call and say, okay, how much do you need? And it's like, oh my goodness, shouldn't everybody be so lucky to have someone like that? And of course that, those folks, I don't know, maybe there's more of them out there than I realized. But Leslie, do you find that to be a useful strategy for you?
It certainly is. I mean, we have a unique funding base with our supports, but we have some individuals who've been longtime donors to us who have relationships with the founders, and that's been really positive for us. And, one area that we haven't fully explored for us is also planned giving. And that means we need to have those conversations and build those relationships to find out who would like to do that, who has a special spot for us in their heart. Because those angel donors typically are people who've had a long time relationship built on some very special experiences. And as someone who has come after a few other directors of the organization, what we need to do is a good job of keeping track of those stories and those experiences, and not assuming we can have the same kind of relationship, but build on the ones that went before us.
Jenna, is that a strategy you've been able to employ on your level?
A little bit. We've had some people inquire and have developed some information, but one of the things we'd like to do here before the end of the year is maybe set up a presentation time and promote it and record it and things like that, how people can do that.
Excellent. We have just a few minutes left in our session. Those of you who are watching and listening, if you have questions, now would be a great time to ask one. We could probably entertain a couple of questions. So I'll give you a minute to think about that and send them our way. And I would like to thank, speaking of sponsors and donors, I would like to thank ITC Midwest, who is our sponsor for the Iowa Ideas sessions, which are happening today and tomorrow. We have fabulous keynote speakers, and we have 10 or 12 tracks of all different interests. And of course, arts and culture is my special interest. So I'm always happy to be part of that. Okay, do we have any questions from our viewers? Oh, the answer is no. So in our remaining few minutes, what's the best piece of advice you've received along the way that you would like to pass along to folks who are seeking funding or wanting to start an event, or whatever they have on their minds?
Well, I guess what I would say is, and Leslie's mentioned this already, but I think every fundraiser knows that it really is all about relationships. And I think as you meet people, I think if you're going to raise money, you have to be very visible in your community, which means not just with your organization, but with everything that's going on, because the more people see you and interact with you, the more they'll remember the organization that you represent, and you build relationships. Some of them are friendships, some of them will become eventual donors. And even people who say, hey, your charity maybe isn't the one that I'm interested in, keep a relationship with them anyway, because you never know what'll happen. And so build your network wide and far and nurture it.
Yeah.
I would say don't be afraid to ask. When I first started, I was really nervous. No one really wants to ask for money, but a lot of people, when it's kind of a snowball effect, and once they see what's happening or they're really passionate about something, whether it's a partnership with another company or even individuals, at the end of the conversation with the individual, hey, you've seen what we're doing and we appreciate your support. Do you have any idea of any other businesses or friends or family or anyone that may be interested? And sometimes people say, no, I don't. And that's great. And sometimes people will say, hey, I heard so-and-so talking the other day, go ask them. So don't be afraid to ask. And it's kind of a snowball effect.
Excellent. We have about 1 minute left. Leslie, any words of wisdom for our viewers?
This is going to sound harsh, but a friend of mine said, don't treat donors like ATMs. And so it relates to both of the comments already. Be curious, do your research, build the relationship, build networks. All that is important.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time and attention. It's been a great conversation, and viewers, lots of good advice to take away from our folks who've been at this either for quite a while or are fairly new to it, but can have great successes even at the new end of it. So thank you so much. We're going to take a lunch break now, and we will be back. Our next sessions begin at 1:20. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
You.